I am most curious about not the next generation, but the generation after that. And if we are doing everything we can to help them find something that inspires them. We live in a world where we think everyone is like us and everyone has those same opportunities and access to those advantages of whatever they may be. If it's innovation, if it's tech for school, if it's internet, basic things that we take for granted, and sitting there wondering if a kid who's 4 years old, 5 years old in another part of the world who doesn't know those advantages, but can we do something to give them those same advantages that we have been given and blessed with? I mean, that's what drives me. I mean, that's what gets me up out of bed every day is, can we inspire one human every day to do something or to be something different or just to inspire someone else?
You're listening to the Curiosity Podcast. Join your hosts Scott Gale and Brad Risacci as they pursue their mission to help humanity get their curiosity back, and on the way, reinvigorate their own.
Today on the show, we have Robert Pieroni. The conversation is one of the few episodes that we've got that is audio only, so you'll just have to use your imaginations as we sat down and talked through Robert's background in life and the work that he is doing here in the city of Houston. Clearly a passionate person around community building and helping individuals, disadvantaged communities, bringing economic benefit to the cities that he works in and supports, and particularly with a focus on Houston. Just a fantastic conversation and an opportunity to learn more about Robert the human.
I think it's amazing how Robert brings the lens of community and economic development together in a really intuitive and simple way that's easy to relate to, digest, understand, and engage with.
Really plays an important sort of figurehead role amongst the community here in Houston, and really a cool opportunity to showcase him on the show. He shared with us that he had not ever been on a podcast before, so excited to have him.
Well, hello, I'm Brad.
I'm Scott.
Welcome to Curiosity.
Here we go. We're here with Robert Pieroni. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We have the whole place to ourselves today, and this will be an audio-only podcast. We typically have sort of a webcast companion alongside us, but it coincided with Energy Tech Night tonight, and so there's not a lick of technology here in this room. So it's just a bit more casual, and it's going to be awesome. We're excited to have you here.
I didn't even have to dress up.
Exactly. We'll do a "What is Brad wearing?" giveaway here as a part of this episode. So we're excited to have Robert here with us. And Brad, tell him what we typically do.
So it's going to be really interesting today. Being audio only, it's a little different vibe. So we're just going to go with the power of storytelling throughout this conversation and just invigorate all of your souls with our lovely voices, which will be great.
That is deep.
Robert, I think as we're kind of kicking off this conversation, it'd just be really lovely just to learn from you, what's the role that curiosity has played throughout your life's work? How has it inspired you as a human being? And how do you foresee that continuing to just excite you in this beautiful journey that you get to live every single day?
Oh, man.
And we only have 30 minutes, so keep it concise.
That's I don't.
You get 30 seconds per question.
I do like to be in front of the microphone. No, I do have a face for TV, not the microphone. No, but I guess for me, curiosity, it's challenging yourself to explore the what if. I think too many people get caught in the mundane of the day to day and stop looking around to figure out, how can you move society forward and humanity forward with whatever gift you've been given? And I go back to a long, long time ago, meeting people in places where the unemployment had skyrocketed to 40% during the 2018 or 2008 downfall of housing, and meeting people who worked so hard just to put food on the table for their families, and thinking, how can a gift that I've been given help advance anyone in this world? And so the curiosity for me is continuing to challenge myself to find meaningful problems and then connect meaningful people to solve these meaningful problems with meaningful solutions. So just continue to explore.
Robert, what are you most curious about right now?
What am I most curious about right now? I am most curious about not the next generation, but the generation after that. And if we are doing everything we can to help them find something that inspires them. We live in a world where we think everyone is like us and everyone has those same opportunities and access to those advantages of whatever they may be. If it's innovation, if it's tech for school, if it's internet, basic things that we take for granted, and sitting there wondering if a kid who's 4 years old, 5 years old in another part of the world who doesn't know those advantages, but can we do something to give them those same advantages that we have been given and blessed with? I mean, that's what drives me. I mean, that's what gets me up out of bed every day is, can we inspire one human every day to do something, or to be something different, or just to inspire someone else?
Can you tell us about some of the projects that you're working on that are kind of moving you down that path?
Yeah, in Houston, we wanted to build a tech hub that took everything from ideation through pre-acceleration to full-blown scale. Basically, that just means we wanted someone with an idea to be able to scale their company, to be able to hire people in the future, create new jobs, new economic opportunity for anyone. And so when you think about it from that perspective, we did it in Houston, but it shouldn't be limited. Talent is not based on a zip code of where someone comes from. And so to think that you can only have these high growth companies providing opportunity and access to people should only be in these 5 major cities around the US is ridiculous. And so we need to be looking and exploring places from Mexico to Europe to places that are just traditionally overlooked. And so just recently I had the blessed opportunity to go to Sicily and talk with startups from Italy that were trying to do something impactful. But even driving through the countryside and looking at some of the other communities, thinking, is there an opportunity to build something there that can inspire that next generation to want to do whatever it is they want to do? But we need to be there. You can't inspire people from afar. And so it's, how do we build hubs and how do we create opportunity right there in the communities where these people are from?
So why Italy in this particular case? Like what drove the connectivity there?
That's a family background. So it's easy for me. And I've always just been fascinated by the culture. I've been fascinated by my passion and love for my home club soccer team. I mean, I'm a Juventus fan through and through. And so, I look at the way the country is currently operated, and there's definitely parts that if we can inspire to create new industries, we can really do something impactful that could change the trajectory of these cities forever and these communities. You think of even here, in America, you have communities that are completely tied to tourism. Like that's their only commerce. They all think they have to be in tourism because that's what we do. And why not? Why can't we create a new industry and spark something? Or is there something that we can do from a tech perspective that gives new opportunity to really not have to just do what you've always had to do because that's what your community was known for?
Can we kind of explore the spectrum of kind of examples here? Like what sort of stands out as like a city that is really sort of on the brink or not doing it well, or maybe you don't want to name names, or to give kind of just some examples of like where that begins to break down, because it seems like on that extreme, uh you don't really see it coming. It's kind of like all of a sudden sort of the tide shifts and economic interest and activity can shift somewhere else and sort of leave communities and cities behind. Are there sort of examples of that come up in the conversation regularly to say like, hey, some of our work and effort here, say in the city of Houston or in your efforts in Italy, it's like we want to avoid sort of this bad outcome, and like what are some of the characteristics of that, so that listeners from around the world here of the Curiosity Podcast, they can sort of have an ear to the ground on some of the things that might be happening in their own communities that might inspire them to pick up the mission and sort of carry that forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because you need to look at the makeup of your community and see, are you heavily dependent on something, and then what are factors that could affect them? I mean, you think of I believe it's the 90s, and someone can fact check me, and then you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. But when the U.S. started doing BRACs, you think of communities that were so tied to Air Force bases, and they never saw that coming. And overnight, 100,000 people could have lost their jobs essentially with the BRAC Air Force Base or something along those lines. They never saw that coming, and they never really created new industry. So what happened was people moved out. So those communities over time continued to dissipate. We've seen that with the Industrial Revolution. We've seen that this last year. Think of any community that was so heavily tied to tourism. All of your commerce were tourism. For the last year and a half, your whole community was wiped out of all commerce. That's people losing jobs, losing businesses, potentially losing houses, and all of the effects that can come with that, because there was no pivot. In tech, we always talk about, is there market adjacencies? Is there pivots? When you're so tied to just one thing, you don't pivot. So if you don't start creating new industry, you can't. And I mean, Houston's actually kind of going through this revolution in real time too, which is extremely fun. We are the energy capital of the world, and we will always be the energy capital of the world. We're still Space City. We are the largest medical center in the world, biggest, medical hub in the world. But we on the ground have also realized we need to start targeting new industry. And so, yes, we're targeting clean tech and all the amazing things happening at Halliburton Labs and Greentown Labs. But we've also realized we need to start creating, maybe it's, B2C software. And so we're targeting accelerators that are going after new industries. And, I always joke, but maybe it's an app to walk dogs. I know those exist, but those are new industries, new jobs that are getting created. And so I think that's really the focus that, most of these cities need to start looking at is, are you dependent on one thing? And if you are, you need to start building for the future. But it also doesn't inspire a whole lot, I don't believe, if growing up, you just feel that's the only route for you because you're a one industry town or a one industry city.
So, Robert, I'm curious. When we think about this more global view that you're touching on, which is really interesting, often it feels as though words like tech and innovation are synonymous with the U.S., at least in our relative ethos. And that's unconscious incompetence at its finest, for sure. However, share a little bit more about that global dynamic and what that kind of reality looks and feels like. And what are some of the similarities, the differences, the complexities? Is it kind of the same everywhere? Does it look a little different based on geography?
No, it's funny. I'll actually go back to a most recent opportunity. I got to meet folks from all over the world on my most recent trip, from Amsterdam to Croatia to Turkey, Canada, and got to have really meaningful conversations about what is tech to them? What does their communities look like? Venture capital, what's it look like? How does it flow? Who gets funded? what are the things they're chasing? And what I realized very quickly was, yes, in the U.S. we are doing very well, statistically speaking. I mean, you can see it. Venture capital, startups. It's, data never lies. Is kind of the way I always say it. But what I started to realize was, man, they are solving some really incredible challenges all over the world that we just need to be a part of. I met a lady out of Amsterdam that her whole passion was built on sustainability and waste. And I was fascinated by everything she said the whole time. I met a venture fund out of Turkey that they were investing in things that were very B2B, but really a lot more from an American standard would be way more baked out. These are like, to us, they'd be almost full-blown companies. They were calling them startups. So I found it fascinating being around these people that we all have a different view on what that actually means. Because in America, I think of, in the tech term, America is still a pre-seed country. We're a very young country compared to most of the world. And I think sometimes we forget that. And so it was just interesting to see the different dynamics and perspectives. We also evaluate things differently. I sat down with people and would review a startup together, and we would give advice, and our advice was so very different, where, we would focus on, maybe it's, what is your customer acquisition? And they had zero interest in understanding that. And it was really just fascinating conversations.
What did you find that some of those groups were more interested in? What intrigued them more about the pitches and the startups?
To answer your question, I really think they were very specific focused when it came to the type of startups that they were looking for. And maybe didn't want to venture too far from that. Granted, personally, I don't know for some of the people that are venture funds there, I don't know what their thesis was. So it might have been aligned with what they were doing. But that is the one thing I noticed is I think for me and the way you two amazing humans are as well, is we're curious. I want to see everything, even if I don't understand it. I want to feel the passion in the founder. I want to feel the passion in their why. So I think we're just a little more curious because maybe we see different technologies more often maybe than in other countries. Because the one thing I kept telling them, and this is the biggest fundamental difference I saw, was we have probably hundreds of thousands of startups compared to thousands of startups. I'll bet our ratio is pretty drastically different. So maybe they just have to be more specific because of that. They also might look for groups that were more established because they don't have as many targets to chase after as we would.
So Robert, in the pregame, we were talking about you get involved in a wide range of kind of different activities. A lot of them have, call it kind of an economic development kind of thread to them. But could you share a bit more about some of the other kinds of things that you spend your time and calories kind of thinking about or working on?
Yeah, I spend my time on helping other people chase down their own curiosities. So I get involved with a lot of startups that have really interesting companies that are curious about solving really complex problems. So I for the last couple of years, I've been working with a group that we went through the Mass Challenge Accelerator right here in Houston, and they do autonomous vehicle parking. So in phase 2 right now, they're doing smart parking, but they have this ambition of eventually cars will park themselves. Incredibly curious to continue to chase and follow. I just recently met another founder who is looking at the way people apply for jobs and doing it in maybe like video snippets. And it's such an intriguing way to think of how you can figure out someone's personality better than in a video. And so it's chasing companies that are doing things like that. I'm working with another company that is exploring this this digital innovation ecosystem because it's the quickest way to break down geographical barriers. That's incredible. Overnight, you can create access and opportunity to people all over the world with venture capital, mentors, whatever it may be, or you can just get a bunch of smart people together to solve really complex problems. So if there's water dependency issues in a country, we can pull people from all over the world overnight to ask them to give time. I genuinely think humanity is so beautiful that people will give their time to solve meaningful challenges and problems if you put them in the same place. And so, chasing down with what that company is doing and the curiosity there, and working with another group out of Austin that's a venture fund, and getting to brainstorm with people who are so intellectual, and once again themselves, they're chasing curiosity and changing the way venture capital should be. They see it as a partnership versus the way that it's become. And so getting to work with people that just want to continue to challenge, to take Brad's comment, like, who's challenging the status quo because they're curious? Those are the people I spend my calories on.
Since you went to challenging status quos, what do you feel like is one way right now, or rather, what is one way right now where you are challenging your own status quo, your own orthodoxies?
Put honey on my peanut butter and jelly sandwich today. Just kidding.
Break it out of the box.
Delicious. A little cinnamon.
It's incredible.
I agree. I put cinnamon on mine today.
I think as we look at challenging the status quo, I think it's getting out of your comfort zone. Challenging the status quo is telling yourself you can actually do things that you don't believe. I think too many times we all put ourselves in a box. I am a corporate this, or I am a startup this, a founder this. I'm good at this, but I'm not good at that. Every day working in the startup community, I challenge myself to learn things that I didn't know. I know certain functions. That's what I'm good at. I might not understand the tech behind what you're doing, but I know how to get you to where you're going to build a roadmap. So I challenge myself to get involved with people where I might not quite fully understand what they're doing, but I have the ability to help them. So I think for me, it's that mind shift. And for most people, it's got to be that mind shift of the status quo. You're the status quo. It's what you tell yourself your limitations are. And as long as you continue to keep yourself in those limitations, you're never going to challenge anything. You're not going to be, to this podcast, you're not going to be curious. The most important thing in the world is curiosity. That's how we've had all these advancements. I sit there and think of, companies right now that are challenging the status quo. I mean, if Starlink can provide internet across the world eventually, think of what that does to the digital divide overnight. It breaks it. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, people said we'd never have electric cars. We have electric cars all over the road now. It's challenging the status quo. That's that. It's those people. It's the disruptors that want to continue to advance things when people say you can't. That's building innovation hubs in places where people say you can't. Anyone that tells me I can't do something, I'm going to prove them wrong. I think that's pretty much how I challenge the status quo every day.
So you look for the I can'ts to turn them into the I cans.
I love the I can'ts.
I read an article this morning about the new Hertz CEO and all the glorious things that are happening over there. Pretty incredible. And for those of you who don't know, Hertz is coming back in a very different way. Check out the articles on Bloomberg and everywhere else for more. But
We'll put them in the show notes, Brad.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. We'll put them in the show notes. That'd be awesome. Thanks. But when there was one line that he had today, and he said, basically, he's turning his whys into why nots. And it really resonated with my soul, because I think that's, I've always said I'm a why baby. Like, when I grew up, I was always the kid asking why. But I think now I'm probably asking myself as an adult more, why not? And, you sharing that that perspective from your own narrative, I think is important, because it's easy to hear like, let's challenge the status quo. But it's that like beautiful moment when we actually challenge ourselves instead of saying, well, you should challenge the status quo. But you're actually the one challenging your own orthodoxies, your own belief systems, your own ideals, your own philosophy, your own faith. And you just start to question. And there's something really beautiful about our own ability to question. And so as you're, kind of thinking about that from your lens and perspective, like what's a cool example of a moment where, you were just going through the motions, right? It's like you're just kind of in the zone. You're in that state of consciousness where everything is just functioning and working. But then something happens, hopefully, and you kind of catch yourself. And that seems to be the sweet spot where we do pause ourselves long enough to challenge, right? What's an example of where and how you've kind of done that?
That's a great question, Brad. In traditional economic development, people are always thinking about how do you move company A to place B. It's about the transferring of jobs. But if you were to really break down, like, what is economic development when it meets economic vitality? And that's actually creating new jobs, net new jobs. And so the moment of shift in time was, how do we do something that's never been done before that creates new opportunity? And in Houston, we did that. In Houston, it was like, well, we're going to make a place for all Houstonians and for Houstonians to prosper forever. And so we challenged the status quo of economic development of saying, how do we move this massive company? 2018, we had a company go global about moving a headquarters. And so everybody chased after them and said, oh, how great would it be if we move this company and we get all these jobs? And in my mind, there was a moment where it says, well, do they import jobs or do they hire local? And you quickly realize they're probably importing a lot. And so we said, well, what if we challenge the status quo? And I said, well, we're going to build our own innovation hub, but we're going to do it differently. We're going to do it like nobody's ever done before. We went out, recruited Mass Challenge from Boston, which is a top 10 startup ranked accelerator, top 10 accelerator. We went out, got Generator, which is another top 10 ranked accelerator, and said, that's crazy. We brought two of these groups to Houston. What's even crazier is, what if we co-locate them? And the only place in the world at the time, I believe, and probably still, where you have two top 10 accelerators co-located. And then we said, well, it'd be even crazier. What if we brought in Impact Hub, which is one of the largest incubators in the world, working towards the betterment of all humanity, and said, let's put them all in a room and see what happens. And so just recently, I was looking at the investment we put into that project. We're 2 years into this project, and we have had a 10x return on our investment for revenue and jobs generated within the space. That is real impact. That is creating new opportunity for Houstonians, but it's a complete mind shift of what traditional economic developers would do. So it was this moment in time where it was, we're just going to do it different. And now we're starting to push that envelope. And I think others around the world have seen it. And that's why you're starting to see these new emerging tech hubs, because I think people are realizing we just create our own. It's net new jobs. That's the quickest way to create opportunity in a community.
Mm. So if we demystify a bit of what that is like in a very real situation, right? One thought that kind of comes to mind is what are those stages? And the first thing is, it seems like, there was that moment where maybe there's like some internal tension going on, which led you to ask a question, which led you to be vulnerable enough to challenge the status quo. And I think that seems like it looked like in your example was you chose to go a different path than the herd mentality of the industry and think differently about what does economic development actually mean and what are we actually trying to do? What is the why? What is the how? And what is the what to really bring that to life? And following that path of why are we doing this? How are we doing this? And what does good actually look like? Seems like a pretty cool way to think about the anatomy of developing that into a very real reality that now exists in the universe and otherwise may not have. And so, for all the listeners and ourselves as well, like when you feel that tension inside, start to ask questions about that, because something magical might be on the other side of that tension.
Robert, you spent a lot of time thinking about startup communities, building sort of lasting impact, thinking about that challenge for a long time. What have you changed your mind about along the way?
Man, I think about it probably daily for 4 to 5 hours, if not all day, really, in reality. I think where I changed my mind was that I think where I really changed my mind was how to quickly get into communities. You need to bring all these resources there, but you need to do it in such a thoughtful way, and you need to do it in a way that's lasting. I remember having conversations with people, and today I have conversations with people that I tell them, if you expand to a market, but don't have a sustainability portion to how you're going to stay in that market, when you're maybe a startup development organization or an SDO, you're going to do more damage than if you go there for 2 years. Because when you leave, you took hope. And the worst thing you could ever do to someone is take the hope away from them. And so I truly do believe now, as you look at innovation hubs around the world, like connecting them digitally first to get the community excited, see what resources are there, should be the first entry to every community, because it's also the fastest way. Get people excited about what you're doing. Maybe a couple of years ago, I would have thought, well, no, you do physical real estate. People have this physical hub. That's where they go. But then you started to quickly realize, innovation needs to happen both digitally and physically. And it's a percentage of each. I don't know if I fully understood that a couple of years ago, but today, 100% bought in. It's a portion of both, because it's the only way you can interconnect people from around the world in minutes. You think about, I can have a conversation with somebody in Italy right now, or they can fly here in 17 hours. I think we realize it's quicker for us to start having meaningful conversations. Don't think I fully understood that 4 or 5 years ago.
And it makes a ton of sense when you think about, as a startup, they start with an alpha product, iterate, beta, they get to proof of concept, all those kinds of things. It's what you're describing. It's like start with sort of a digital instance of it, low barrier to entry, get the startup community starting to congeal before you really take these big steps in terms of sort of a physical presence. But those physical collisions matter and need to be curated, but it's kind of the sequencing and how to kind of build towards that. Is that fair?
Exactly. 100% agree. And to even go into it, it's funny you said it, as like a product evolves, it's the features evolve, even the features within it. You think you go from digital, you bring in pre-acceleration to acceleration, you have incubators, you have co-working space, but then how do you bring in the resources like the investors, and how do you bring in the mentors? How do you bring in, well, after they graduate from co-working, where do they go? And so it is a continued iteration. And I think that's where my mind has gone over the last couple of years, is it's a full iteration of, well, if we jump in virtually first or digitally first, the rest gets built along the way. But the whole time you actually are progressing the community 10 times faster than you thought you were by building a solid project.
So Robert, you were just on Digital Fight Club as a fighter, talking about a very similar topic around the role of innovation and the necessity of physical and digital infrastructure converging together. It's an and rather than a but. Good saying around that. Don't be a but, be an and. And as we think about the beautiful conversation that you had during that fight, or debate rather, I would be really curious about, your perspective as one who has grown up in economic development that is very much focused on physical infrastructure, and then the infinite amount of orthodoxies that have been completely obliterated throughout the pandemic. Where's your mindset today? Like, what does that look like in your reality? And does economic development now become a tech company in as much as it's a physical real estate company?
No, yeah, that's deep as well. Brad's coming in hot. And I have to point out, I did get to beat one of my best friends at Digital Fight Club, so I hope he listens to this because love you, Lawson, but still had to beat you.
I was going to let you go ahead and shameless plug that one.
I don't know if it was much of a fight. I think it was just me winning. But no, I'm kidding. It was fun. And
it was a great fight for anyone who missed it.
Great experience and really challenged myself to think. And I've challenged myself over the last year and a half to think about that exact topic. And physical real estate's never going to go away. Companies will continue to work in physical locations. What it looks like will change. There will be hybrid. There will be new tools that are being developed currently to make the hybrid more efficient. I think right now we are limited based on the tools that are out there. And that's why we're seeing the evolution of things that are happening with the tools that exist. But physical real estate will continue to drive economic impact in communities. Companies will continue to lease space, but they'll work more efficiently. I do fully think, we've seen it. People want to be around each other. Statistics never lie. Turn on a baseball game, a football game, a basketball game, a soccer game. There's hundreds of thousands of people all around each other. So it's just looking at what the next evolution will look like. And as an economic developer in a city, people need to start thinking through, we might only have a 3 and 4 day workforce downtown. And so it's just a shift in your mind. But from a physical real estate perspective, I don't think much will change, or at least right now, we don't know, I guess is the best way to say that.
And then what about the role of digital in economic development, the role of tech in economic development?
Well, that's gonna be hard to quantify. I'm not gonna lie. I would love to say it's easy to quantify, but traditional economic development is jurisdictionally bound, meaning it has a barrier of where it can go, a barrier. And so, I think of years and years ago, I was asked to do an analysis on a project as it related to food trucks and sales tax, and cities that don't allow them, cities that allow them, and what was always hard for cities to go through was the tracking of sales tax to make sure that if they let food trucks in, they're not taking away from brick and mortar, because if that point of sale is actually going back to another community, it's not helping their community. They're actually hurting their community. And so it's very similar of, I don't know if anyone knows that answer yet, because how do you quantify something that no longer has a boundary? And so for a traditional economic developer, and I'm anything but that, clearly, they're focused on two key metrics, right? Their KPIs are jobs and capital investment. That's going to be really hard to quantify in the digital space.
Sounds like we might need some startups to come help out and tackle that very complex ambition. Love it.
Gauntlet thrown. Robert, this has been a fascinating discussion. It's been really awesome to have you on. Where can people find you?
At home. No. Funny. As somebody who's also in the tech world, I don't have many social media handles at all, if any. So it's pretty much LinkedIn, and that's just Robert Pieroni on LinkedIn. Find me. I get to explore fun, fascinating things with great people like Brad and Scott and others, and just enjoy life. So I hope to hear from people.
Amazing discussion. Good to have you on, Robert.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on.
Thank you for listening. Join Brad and Scott next time on the Curiosity Podcast.